Good morning, everybody. And my name's Mike Wilson. I'm from ABB Robotics, and I'm going to try and convince you that robot automation is important for the future of UK manufacturing and also as the foundation for smart factories. I just want to start by talking about the challenges that UK manufacturing faces today. And I'm sure you all know this, but growing competition from overseas, ever-increasing costs, and probably less well known, we are facing a skills shortage. It's predicted that there's over 250,000 vacancies in engineering businesses by 2022. So we need to find more people. We're obviously facing the challenge of Brexit and what that may mean, but in some sectors, particularly in food, there's a very significant challenge in terms of availability of labour. 14% of the workforce in food manufacturing and the total is about 400,000, so 14% is quite a lot, came into the UK in the last 5 years, and they are starting to go home. So the food sector is facing a labour availability problem. We're also facing challenges in terms of productivity. Our productivity performance is not improving at the same rate as our competitors overseas, and we're about 20% behind our major competitors. One of the industries that solve that problem is automotive. They've grown their productivity over the last few years. They're producing more than 50% per hour than they were in 2009. And the way they've been able to do that is by investing in new technology. But I should also add that that new technology, particularly robots, for example, has led to the creation of thousands and thousands of jobs. Jaguar Land Rover, for example, have put in 4,500 robots over the last few years, but at the same time, they've also created thousands of jobs. And I would argue that if they hadn't put that automation in, the plants would have been built somewhere else in the world, and none of those factories would be here, and none of those jobs would be here. And effectively, what it comes down to is working smarter, not harder, giving the staff the tools they need to do their jobs more efficiently. It's not about using people as machines, performing repetitive, mundane, arduous tasks. It's about using robots to do those tasks and using the people where their skills and attributes can add value to the product. Unfortunately, in the UK, we're behind in terms of the utilisation of robots. This is data from the International Federation of Robotics, and I should stress this is outside of the automotive industry because you'd expect a car plant in the UK to be very similar to a car plant overseas. So in all other manufacturing sectors, this is the number of robots used per 10,000 workers. It's a relative measure. And you can see that Germany uses 181 robots per 10,000 workers, whereas we're down at 39. So we're way behind our major competitors. And I should also add that China...
Supply chains for the fourth industrial revolution will be starting in 5 minutes. John Wright from IBM and Tom Dawes from Value Chain will be speaking. Please take your seats before 11:45.
Apologies for that. China, for example, is now putting in more robots per year than any other country in the world. And they're actually at 33 robots per 10,000 workers, and they're catching us up fast. So unless we address this problem, we're going to find it increasingly difficult to be competitive. And what are the reasons for that? Why are we not employing these robots? Well, we've done some surveys, so we kind of understand what the marketplace think. And there is a perception that robots are great for automotive, but they're not for us, because everybody's seen the robots on the TV in the car plants. People believe they need flexibility, and they can only get that from the use of labour. They think they don't have the skills, they think they're too small, they think robots are expensive, and lastly, the workforce won't accept them. Now, the technology is moving on, they're becoming easier to apply, they're becoming cheaper to use, and the advantage of robot systems is they are flexible. So those perceptions are not correct. And the last one I think is particularly important. If management does invest in a factory by employing automation, it gives the workforce the confidence that the management believes in the future of that business. They're willing to invest in that business. and therefore their jobs are secure for the long term. Yes, people may be redeployed, but robots per se don't lead to loss of jobs. They lead to people doing more interesting tasks. So moving on to Industry 4.0, I won't go through all of the details of the previous industrial revolutions, other than to say that the third industrial revolution apparently was about automation, robotics, and PLCs. Now, I would argue in the UK that we've got many businesses that as yet haven't done the third industrial revolution. So it is something of a challenge when we start talking about the fourth. So the fourth is more about information communication technology. But if you don't have the automation in the robots in place, you don't have the basis for that smart factory. It's all very well putting all the clever stuff in the cloud above your factory and collecting all the data and using that information. But unless you have the robots and automation to give you that smart factory, you're not going to really get the benefits that you can from Industry 4. Now, there has been an industrial digitalization review, and I'm sure if you're in the main conference area, you will be hearing something about that. That was set up off the back of the government's industrial strategy green paper early last year. And that was all about trying to build the UK so we could be a world leader in manufacturing, recapturing the spirit of the Industrial Revolution so that the UK can be a leader. What the Made Smarter review, which was the output of this industrial digitalisation review, determined was we had the opportunity to become a global leader. It would lead to over 170,000 new jobs. But there were some challenges. We'd have to upskill 1 million industrial workers to be able to accommodate these new technologies. The benefit, though, was we would improve our productivity by 25%. So we would close the productivity gap that I had identified earlier. And overall, it was going to be worth over £450 billion over the next 10 years to the UK economy. A very significant impact. Now, the element of that in terms of robotics and automation was over £180 billion. So a very large contributor to the overall benefits of Industry 4. So it shows the importance of robots and automation within the improvement of UK manufacturing. Now, I mentioned that robots are becoming easier to use, cheaper to use, and that is true. There was a study done a couple of years ago by Boston Consulting Group that identified 3 major trends in the development and use of advanced industrial robots. The first, that they're becoming more cost effective. The technology becomes cheaper, but at the same time, labour costs continue to rise. Not only in terms of the minimum wage, but also things like the pension levy, the apprenticeship levy. All of those things are driving our labour costs up. The technology advances in the robot systems are making them easier to apply, easier to use, easier to maintain. And all of that is making systems more affordable and more appropriate for the smaller manufacturers. What the Boston Consulting Group concluded was that by 2025, the share of tasks performed by industrial robots would rise to about 25% from the 10% that it is today. And that would boost manufacturing productivity by up to 30%. Now, the important thing to bear in mind there is that we're already 20% behind. The rest of the world is doing this. If they're going to improve their productivity by 30%, we have a long way to go in terms of maintaining our competitive position. They also concluded that when the costs become sufficiently low, you reach an inflection point where the use of robots is the most obvious choice. The automotive industry is already there. When they build a new car plant, it's not a question of will we use robots, it's a question of how many robots we will use. The food sector isn't quite there yet because their labour rates are lower, but they're getting very close to that point. So we do need to accelerate our use of robots and automation in the UK. And I'm not going to pretend it's cheap. There are significant upfront costs, but they operate reliably every hour, every day. you can operate facilities unmanned. There are factories in the UK that will load machines up at the end of the shift and they'll go home. And the robots will then tend those machines during the night, effectively giving the factory free production. It also allows the staff to be utilised better. I've said it before, but use them where their skills and attributes add value to the product. And it's not about the short term. The robot systems last for many years. They produce high quality for many years. We have robot systems in the UK that are over 20 years old, still running very reliably, very successfully, paid for themselves many times over. So a quote from Henry Ford, if you need a machine and don't buy it, then ultimately you'll find that you've paid for it and don't have it. Now my take on that is that you're spending that cost every hour, every day, and you will continue to spend that cost forever unless you do something different. If you automate it, if you put robots in, eventually you will pay for that equipment. It may take 2 years, it may take 3 years, but once you've paid for that equipment, you're no longer spending that cost and you've improved your facility. So it's all about having a longer term vision, thinking about where you want to be in 5 or 10 years. So in conclusion, I think we all want manufacturing to be competitive. Personally, I think there are 3 pillars for success: product and process innovation, and we're actually pretty good at that. Effective organisation, and we've been pretty good at applying lean techniques to make our organisations effective. What we're particularly poor at in the UK is capital investment. Success requires a change of our culture. We need to invest in the latest equipment. As it says there, sweat the assets, not the people. And that was actually a quote from a bank manager to a small manufacturing company. He couldn't figure out how to grow his business. And his bank manager said to him, sweat the assets, invest in the business. Don't try and get more out of the people. And ultimately, as we saw earlier, we need flexibility, flexible automation, and robotics is the long-term answer. So it has the opportunity to transform our manufacturing productivity, make UK manufacturing competitive, successful, to compete in the world environment. And hopefully that's good for all of us. Thank you. Any questions, quickly? Yes, if you give me a card, I'll send it to you. Okay, thank you very much.